Bridges, trains, and the Willamette River. For decades, the City of Roses has been one of the top places to bike in America, and today I'm taking you on a city tour. It's the Greenway with Mac, a channel dedicated to active transportation, and this tour is intended to give you a taste of what it is like to ride in central Portland. The ride starts downtown, near many of the large hotels. The circuitous route generally makes a figure-8 shape, crossing the river to the Eastbank Esplanade, back across the Tilikum Bridge, up to better Naito forever, back over the river on the Burnside Bridge, up to the new Blumenauer Bridge, past the Convention Center, across the Steel Bridge to Union Station, and finally over to Providence Park. While not at all direct, this city tour should give you a broad idea of what it's like to ride in the city, and hopefully help you to plan your trip. Down below is Naito Parkway, and we will be riding in that green bike lane in a few minutes. The green painted lane makes following the dedicated path nice and easy. In addition, the bike and pedestrian icons indicate that pedestrians should stay to the right and people on wheels to the left. And that makes sense, because you may want to stop and take some pictures along that rail. I chose to start on Southwest Madison because it takes us directly to our first bridge, the Hawthorne. The Hawthorne Bridge was opened in 1910 and carries 800 buses and 8,000 bicycles per day. Originally, the deck and sidewalks were made of timber, but now the roadway is open steel, while the sidewalks are made of concrete and aluminum. The span is the oldest vertical lift bridge still operating in the United States. The height is also the lowest on the river, so it opens up to 200 times per month. The city of Portland straddles the Willamette River, so each bridge is a very important connection for accessing its different neighborhoods. The river flows from our right to left, which is south to north. About 12 miles north of us, it joins the Columbia River at the Washington-Oregon border before flowing into the Pacific about 100 miles later. One of the highlights from our trip was taking a boat cruise on the river, and I'll point out the location where we boarded the boat when we pass by it in a couple of miles. Make your first right as soon as you've crossed the river. This connector takes us down to the east side of the river on a section of trail called the Eastbank Esplanade. We will take it left, or south, but the trail continues north a little over a mile to the Steel Bridge. The signage is pretty good on the major greenways in the city, like this one here. Kerr Bikes and Boats is a place where you can rent items for the streets and river. They also have an assortment of adaptive bikes that you can rent, which is really convenient with its location right here on the path. This loud double-decker highway is Interstate 5, and I'll cover a little story about its history once we get back to the other side of the river. For now, let's just appreciate this absolute gem of a trail that is great for all ages. This section is part of the 10.6-mile classic Waterfront Loop ride and is an amazing multi-use path that is a fantastic option for riding long distances almost fully separated from vehicles. I almost chose the trail as the subject of this video. However, I thought I should show you a few segments of it, and you could explore the missing links without your online cicerone. The USS Blueback is located down below and is part of the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. Called OMSI for short, this location opened in 1992 on donated land from Portland General Electric. There are a variety of different exhibit halls, a planetarium, a couple auditoriums, and a science playground for young children. Now that we've seen a bit of the city, let's talk numbers. The city has an impressive 120 miles of protected bike lanes and off-street multi-use trails, like the one we are currently on. We are going to cross our next bridge, but if you continue straight, you will connect with the Springwater Corridor. This mostly completed off-street trail follows the Willamette and branches to the east to follow Johnson Creek. The section along this river is called Springwater on the Willamette. The section that runs along Johnson Creek is called the Springwater Corridor Trail and seems to run on a dedicated path for 17 miles to the town of Boring, Oregon. But in addition to these incredible off-street greenways, what separates it from most cities in the country is its network of on-street neighborhood greenways. Portland has 94 additional miles of neighborhood greenways, which are streets that have slow speed limits and may have frequent stop signs and other features to slow traffic. And while this channel takes its name for the off-street variety that you see in places like St. Louis, Missouri and Valencia, Spain, I do appreciate the street improvements and safety measures that enable these on-street greenways to provide a stronger network. In fact, a recent paper from Portland State University found a link between the quality of a bike network and one's decision to make a trip by bike. Females and low-income families were specifically more likely to bike when the network was well connected. Crashes and injuries are most impacted by the number of people biking on a road, so when paired together, these factors can positively impact one another. Neighborhood greenways fill in network gaps, which increase people biking, and both factors make it safer for all of us. This map shows the city's plan for a connected network of neighborhood greenways. This span across the river is called Tilikum Crossing, Bridge of the People. Famous in urbanist communities since its inception, the bridge was opened in 2015. Trains, buses, streetcars, bikes, pedestrians, and emergency vehicles are all permitted on the bridge, but what makes it so unique is that private cars and trucks are not allowed. It was the first major bridge in the US that was designed in such a way. The span is a cable-stayed bridge, and it gets its name from the Chinook word for people. Chinook are people indigenous to the Pacific Northwest. The bridge is 1,720 feet long and 180 feet above the river. There are walking and biking paths on each side, with light rail stations on each end. The bridge was designed by McDonald Architects, who also designed the new eastern span of the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge, which I covered in this video. This train is the Max Orange Line, which would have been coming north from Milwaukie, Oregon, and terminates at Union Station. This won't be the last time that we cross paths with the Orange Line. Across the river here is the South Waterfront neighborhood. You can head left and take the South Waterfront Greenway. Up on the hill is Oregon Health and Science University, and you can actually take a gondola to get up there. You can see the wires and tower behind this train. Unfortunately, we were short on time in the city, so I'll have to check it out on the next visit. I want to give a quick thanks to Taylor Griggs of Bike Portland for helping me to plan this ride. Bike Portland is a news outlet that has a ton of great articles, YouTube videos, and a podcast that cover all the cool bike-related stuff in town. Consider supporting them as they fight the good fight and promote active transportation in the city. I've linked to a bunch of their stuff in the description. This section of the tour moves north along the waterfront for about 1.5 miles and is part of the classic 10-mile waterfront loop ride. This is another great section of trail that keeps us separated from traffic. I was so hypnotized by the green paint that I missed our turn the first time around. Hang a right here and ride past Poets Beach. We could have kept going on that green path, but it dumps you onto the street, and I wanted to stay on separated segments as much as possible. Portlanders are fortunate to have an open space along the water just north of Interstate 5. At one point, Harbor Drive was built to funnel large volumes of traffic through Portland, similar to many American cities, as the automobile replaced many streetcar routes. Seattle, San Francisco, Cincinnati, New York City, and many others built freeways that decimated the value of their waterfront with loud, obnoxious, polluting highways. While many cities are stuck with the legacy of a car-first approach to cities, San Francisco, Portland, and Rochester, New York are a few examples that demonstrate what is possible when you remove highways. In Portland's case, this section of the waterfront was ironically saved by another highway. Following the passage of the Federal Aid Highway Act, which funded the original interstate highway system, the government approved funding for sections of what would become Interstate 5. While some city leaders hoped that Harbor Drive would convert to Interstate 5, the federal government had approved a route west of here on a route called the Stadium Freeway. Without the support of the federal government, combined with increased political pressure from locals who were becoming upset about access to the water and a few other factors, the writing was on the wall for Harbor Drive. In the 1970s, leaders successfully ripped out Harbor Drive and replaced it with what we see today, Tom McCall Waterfront Park. Tom McCall was a journalist and TV news reporter who was a fierce advocate for protecting the environment. He later went into politics and was elected governor of Oregon in 1966. It was he who strongly advocated for Harbor Drive's removal, and so the park was named for him. There is a fantastic documentary by Peter Dibble about the removal of Harbor Drive, and I have included a link to it in the description. President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act included $3 billion to kick off the process of removing some urban highways. There are some really good lessons to be learned from Harbor Drive, and I really hope that this is an idea that spreads and receives financial support in the coming decades. I mean, just look around. All of this, would be a loud, polluting highway that repels people. Instead, it's an inviting green space that attracts people. Waterfront real estate is extremely valuable and should be used for parks, housing, businesses, and other things that create value. Urban highways, especially along the water, destroy it. Better Naito is an updated segment of protected bike lanes that runs along Naito Parkway. Wait for the green bike signal and carefully cross this road before continuing north. This path officially opened in May of 2022. I think they did a really nice job with it. It appears that they removed one travel lane and separated the path with concrete. While green paint is nice, what I appreciate is the physical separation from vehicles. You can also ride on a separate path closer to the water that runs a couple of miles all the way past the Broadway Bridge. One of the highlights of our trip to Portland was taking a boat tour on the river with the Portland Spirit, and we boarded it here at Salmon Springs Dock. We took the trip south and enjoyed views of the bridges, homes, and natural beauty of the area. Some trips go north to the Columbia River, which we will have to do next time. There's also a second boarding location just southeast of Tilikum Crossing. Portland has a bike share system and it's called Biketown. Since I was really limited on time, this option was really convenient and I used one of their e-bikes. Biketown is operated by Lyft and the main sponsor is Nike. You can use the Biketown app to rent a bike, but you can also use the Lyft app, which does make it easier if you already have payment options set up there. Their service area seems to cover downtown and a large section east of the river from here. If I had more time, I would have rented from a shop, and I know that there are a lot of good ones in town. It was a little pricey at about $21 for a little over an hour. There isn't a separate path from here to the Burnside Bridge, so we are turning left on Southwest Pine. This neighborhood is called Old Town Chinatown, or just downtown. There is a variety of bike infrastructure types, from sharrows to bike lanes, both protected and non, and I even saw a section closed to vehicles. The red and blue Max lines run pretty frequently, so it's no surprise that I caught both on Southwest 1st Avenue. In general, I felt safe in this neighborhood during the day, but we walked around this area in the evening and observed some of the unsavory people and activities that people rant about regarding Portland and other West Coast metros. This was a Friday afternoon in late June, so my observation is that this area is quiet and far from the hellscape that Fox News claims it to be. There is actually a parking protected bike lane over to the left, but I didn't see it when I made the turn. Street View on Google Maps hadn't been updated since 2019, so I wasn't expecting it. A popular stop for visitors is Voodoo Donut, and they have a location one block up this street and to the right. There's also a location in the neighborhood after we cross our next bridge. We are making a right up here, and it is a little awkward making this turn from the left side. You'll want to be super careful turning and make sure that you have the green signal. Over on the left is the iconic Portland, Oregon White Stag sign, which was erected in 1940. Below to the right, adjacent to Better Naito, is the Portland Saturday Market. The open-air market seems to be open from March to December on Saturdays from 10 to 5. The Burnside Bridge opened in 1926 and originally had 6 lanes of car traffic. In 1996, one lane was repurposed for these bike lanes and another lane converted to an eastbound transit lane. The opening mechanism, called a bascule, was actually designed by Joseph Strauss, the ambitious engineer whose design would be used for the Golden Gate Bridge, which opened 11 years later. Speaking of the Golden Gate, I've filmed a ton on and around the bridge, so if you'd like to see a video about biking across that one, then make sure you're subscribed so you can see it when it's finished. The vertical clearance of the Burnside is higher than the Hawthorne, and so openings are only required about 40 times per month. One thing you'll notice about Portland is that the streets commonly have directions in the street names. It appears that the river divides east from west, and Burnside splits north and south, as the Saturday Market is on southwest Naito, while that apartment building on the left is northwest 2nd. This side of the bridge is the Kerns neighborhood, which is bordered by the river, Highway 84, Burnside, and 32nd Avenue. Kerns benefits from its proximity to downtown, with great restaurants, parks, and shopping. Homes here are a little larger, some of which have been divided into multifamily units. There are some newer homes, but still a lot of charming houses from the early 1900s. 1 block south of us is Southeast Ankeny, which is a neighborhood greenway. The bike lanes disappear on Burnside, so Ankeny is going to be the best east-west route and is part of the city's plan for improving safety for walkers and rollers. You will find some features like modal filters that prevent cars from driving long distances on the greenway while enabling bikes and pedestrians to pass through. Downtown Portland and this neighborhood to the east of the river are part of Oregon's 1st congressional district. But in nearby District 3, there's a legendary representative who's been a champion for biking. Earl Blumenauer started the Congressional Bike Caucus when he joined Congress in 1996. Currently, with 130 members representing 39 states and D.C., the Bike Caucus is a bipartisan group that pushes for safer streets, pro-bike policies, and livable communities. They are fighting the good fight in Washington and were able to add historic funding for active transportation in the 2021 Infrastructure and Jobs Act. In addition, they required states to use 2.5% of highway funds for complete streets projects. These are things like improved sidewalks, protected bike lanes, bulb outs, and road diets. While not the sexiest projects, these are proven safety measures that improve the lives of all of us who choose to get around by bike. Blumenauer co-leads the caucus with Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts and Republican Vern Buchanan of Florida. Blumenauer is known for biking around Washington, D.C. to the Capitol and the White House for meetings and events. Unfortunately for all of us, Mr. Blumenauer has announced that this is his last term in Congress, but with the Bike Caucus established, his legacy should carry on with new members carrying the Safe Streets torch. His legacy also lives on with this bridge, which is named for him and brings us into his district. The bridge was opened in July of 2022, and in the description I have a link to a neat video of it being put in place. The span crosses Interstate 84, which runs southeast to Utah and Idaho. The bridge and street improvements look great here, but the street connections on both sides are mostly paint, so there is an opportunity for more physical separation so that all users would feel safe accessing the bridge. You can continue straight to arrive at Lloyd Center, which is a large mall. I wanted to ride past the convention center, so I crossed the street before making a left turn to head down the hill. If you look left at this intersection, you can see how unfriendly this is for bikes. which really shows the value of the Blumenauer Bridge. This area is part of the Lloyd District, which is largely a commercial district that is served by both the red and blue MAX lines. There are also a lot of hotels nearby, which is super convenient for convention and basketball visitors. The convention center is known for its focus on sustainability, both in design and maintenance. It was the first existing convention center in the United States to receive a LEED Platinum rating from the Green Building Council. Some of the key features on the building to earn that rating are the second largest array of solar panels on a convention center, a rain garden, and a strict waste diversion policy. The World Athletics Indoor Championships were held here in 2016, and during the pandemic it was used to house the homeless population. Continue straight through this light and you'll go to the Moda Center, home of the Portland Trailblazers. Behind it is Veterans Memorial Arena, which was the original home of the Blazers. The Beatles, Led Zeppelin, and Elvis have all performed at the arena, and Barack Obama spoke here in March of 2008 before winning the Democratic nomination. Now the arena is used for the Portland Winterhawks, a major junior hockey team in the Western Hockey League. This path takes us down to the lower section of the steel bridge, where we will cross it. I had actually gone over to the Moda Center and had looked at crossing on the upper span, but the lower section ended up being a much safer, wider, and dedicated option for people on bikes. Both the MAX blue and red lines use the steel bridge to cross the river. Bikes are allowed on the trains and buses, so you can use these forms of public transportation to access wider areas on the map, especially if you can't find a comfortable bike route to reach them. Space is limited for all services. If you decide to fly and want to bring your bike, then there are a few things that I observed to make this a bike-friendly airport. First, you can simply bring your bike on the light rail system, called MAX, at the airport station. But if you want to bike from the airport, then you can use their bike assembly area, which is clearly labeled along with other transportation-related signs. I didn't see what the quality of roads would be, but it did look like a trip downtown would be in a lot of unprotected bike lanes. But a trip to Portland does not have to be by plane or private car. Amtrak is another solid option, and it operates from a station downtown. I'll talk more about the station after we ride past it. For now, let's talk about this cool bridge. This 8-foot wide bike path was opened in 2001, and it was a delight to ride across. I think it's really cool to cross the river at this level and see these tracks used by Amtrak up close. The style of the steel bridge is a through-truss, double-deck, vertical lift. I mentioned earlier that the Hawthorne Bridge is the oldest vertical lift in the country. The steel is second. Vertical lift bridges work by sliding the deck up, and the counterweights only need to be the same weight as the deck. Bastille-style bridges, like the Burnside, need much heavier counterweights, which is why the vertical lift is more common when you need to move more weight, like when you have train tracks on it. The bridge was opened in 1912 and replaced the original steel bridge at this site. This area under the overpasses has been eyed as a location for a skate park for many years, and just recently, the city of Portland committed $15 million to finally get it built. The drawings look really cool, and locals have called this the crown jewel of Portland's skate park system plan. Right after the train tracks and along the fence is an off-street path that I could have taken, but I missed it. These bike lanes weren't terrible, but I'll get off the street whenever I can. On the map it's labeled green like a bike path, but maybe it's a little tight. If you're familiar with this path, add a note in the comments and let me know if it's worth taking that part of the trail. The flexible posts here were a little inviting, but they disappear as the curb becomes a place for car storage. The cars passing by, and these guys with their door open, show why many people justifiably do not feel safe riding in a painted bike lane. The reason I headed this way was so we could swing by Union Station. If you are on foot, you can actually take the stairs up here to have a more direct connection. There aren't a lot of driveways on this street, so restriping it to create parking protected lanes would go a long ways towards improving safety and comfort. This neighborhood is also part of Old Town. As soon as we pass under the Broadway Bridge, we are in the Pearl District. This is the Broadway Bridge up ahead, and if that color looks familiar to you, you may know it as International Orange. This is the same color paint that is used on the Golden Gate Bridge. Originally, the Broadway, Steel, and Hawthorne bridges were all painted black, but in the 60s it was suggested to give each one a distinct color. The Steel stayed black, while the Hawthorne was originally painted a yellow ochre and then green in the 90s. The Broadway Bridge is a rail-type, double-leaf bascule design, Portland's first, and opened in 1913. The clearance below is 90 feet, which is tall enough that it only needs to be opened on average about once a day. And that's a good thing if you're trying to cross it, because due to its complicated design, with the counterweights located above the bridge's deck, openings take about 20 minutes. This compares to between 5 and 8 minutes for the Morrison, Burnside, and Hawthorne bridges. The bridge originally opened for streetcars, but later added cars. The streetcars stopped in 1940, and the tracks were later removed. In 2012, the tracks were added back, and the streetcars returned. The A and B loop streetcar lines currently use the bridge. In the mid-1980s, the Pearl District was rezoned from industrial to mixed use, which attracted artists who breathed new life into the area. Warehouses became lofts, high-rises were erected, and parks were built. The Fields Park is an open green space with a playground and pavilion that is located right by this building on the right. Some of this development was enabled by removing the Lovejoy Viaduct, which was one more block ahead, but this picture gives you an idea of what it would have been like down here. The Lovejoy Viaduct was a 2,000-foot connection to the Broadway Bridge that was largely removed in 1999. I was trying to figure out why all of these people were here along the fence. I think it's for the Greyhound station across the street, but FlixBus picks up here as well. FlixBus can take you from here directly to a dozen locations in Washington, Oregon, and northern Idaho. They usually accommodate 5 bikes on the rack behind the bus, 3 non-e-bikes in a bike cover in the baggage compartment, or you can put your folding bike in the bulky baggage area. Greyhound lets you bring your bikes as well, but you have to box it up yourself and it seems less accommodating. There is a fee to add your bike on either service. While the Lovejoy Viaduct is gone, the Broadway ramps are still here and hang over us like a dark cloud. And to run these right next to the train station, one of the most beautiful Union stations in the country, is really a bummer. Portland's Union Station was built in 1896, and its defining features are the pebble-dash stucco masonry exterior, the bright red roof, and of course the 150-foot tall Romanesque Revival clock tower. Above the 6-foot-tall clock face are signs that say, "Go by train" and "Union Station." The station is a really useful hub because nearby you have access to Amtrak, the streetcars, MAX, and an assortment of local, regional, and long-distance buses. We took Amtrak from here to Seattle on the Cascades service. It was a Friday afternoon when we made the trip, and the train was much faster than taking a car. And at 3.5 hours, the train trip even beats flying once you add the commute to the airport, an hour or two for security, waiting at baggage claim, and commuting from the airport. It's not even close. Plus, the trip was about $30 one way. Nobody had to drive, so we could relax and enjoy the views. We had cocktails and a snack, and played Yahtzee with the man that we were seated next to. Even if it wasn't cheap and convenient, I find this method of travel to be more enjoyable, interesting, and memorable. Both Seattle and Portland train stations are right downtown, which is one of the best benefits of train travel overall. There are groups pushing to make this a high-speed rail corridor, and a little money from the Infrastructure Act was set aside to study this idea further. If this becomes high-speed rail, then the Cascades corridor would absolutely blow flight times out of the water. Up ahead is a mandatory stop in Portland if you are a bookworm. Powell's City of Books claims to be the largest independent new and used bookstore in the world. There are several locations in Portland, but their headquarters is up ahead on Burnside. I've stopped here on both of my visits to Portland, and each time I get lost in the multi-level labyrinth. They face challenges in an increasingly online and digital world, so if you like places like this, then I would encourage you to stop by and support them. In hindsight, I should have been one street to our left on Northwest Flanders. This road has traffic lights and 2 lanes of one-way traffic, which are a recipe for faster car speeds. Northwest Flanders has 2 bidirectional lanes and frequent stop signs, which are ingredients for slower car speeds. Since I was alone, I was less picky on this ride, but I would have chosen Flanders if the family was with me. That route would have also given me a straight shot to the amazing bike and pedestrian Ned Flanders Bridge, which is named for the Simpsons character. Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, grew up in Portland, and many characters are named after its streets, including this one, so the name has actually come full circle. Flanders Bridge crosses Interstate 405, also called the Stadium Freeway, which was the other federally funded highway segment responsible for killing Harbor Drive. Originally just the Flanders Bridge, it was both opened and renamed in 2021. Once across it, we are in the Northwest District neighborhood. And we can't just pass this semi parked at the modal filter without mentioning it. The curb we just passed on the right was wide open, yet he chose to park here. At least he didn't block the flow of bikes, so kudos for only being half an a-hole. This area is also called the Alphabet District because each letter of the alphabet is represented from our left to right. Flanders was not the only name borrowed by Groening, as the characters of Kearney, Reverend Lovejoy, and Mayor Quimby all get their names from this alphabetic section. Our final stop on this tour is Providence Park, which is home to the Portland Timbers, and we are getting close. The Timbers have been an MLS team since 2011 and have played here the whole time. The team set an MLS record of 163 straight sellouts, which ran from their inaugural match until the pandemic. Portland Thorns FC, a National Women's Soccer League team, started sharing the stadium in 2013 when they entered their league. In 1977, the New York Cosmos beat the Seattle Sounders on this field 2-1 to win the North American Soccer League Soccer Bowl in what would be Pele's last official game. This location has actually been hosting events since the 1800s when it was Multnomah Field. These events include Oregon versus Oregon State football games, world-class music acts, baseball games, and cricket matches. The urban stadium is filled with tradition and has become one of my favorites in the country because it is one of the only few that is not surrounded by a parking crater. Instead, it is served well by transit and is surrounded by places to hang out both before and after the game. Share this video with a bike buddy and help get more people to choose a bike over a car on their next trip. I hope you've enjoyed this tour of Portland. I'll see you on the next city tour.